Hello, and welcome back to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and today I'm excited to start a little mini-series on resizing or rescaling things in Finale. I'm calling this Be Wise Resize, and bonus points to those of you that got the play on words to a certain slogan from the 80s and 90s. Good for you if you got that. But anyway, so we're talking about resizing or rescaling in Finale. And you can kind of think of this in two different ways. Now, Finale uses fonts to create most of the items for music. You know, things like the clefs and the accidentals and the time signature. These are all font elements. So technically, resizing can be achieved by changing the actual size of the font. And there's a lot of ways we can do this. Most notably, from the document options in the fonts pane here, we can change all kinds of notation elements just by choosing one, let's say clef, choosing setting font, and over here we can see that there is a size for this Finale Meister font. Well, if you actually literally change the size of that font, that will literally resize the clefs in your score, and it will resize them all, and now they're really super small. You can do that with basically any of the elements that exist in the notation section here in the fonts, right? So that's one way to sort of globally resize things if you really want to. I wouldn't recommend doing this most of the time unless you're doing something really subtle, like going from 24 to 25 or something. But that's one way to do it. You can also do this sort of globally with certain library items like expressions. So if I were to go in here and look at my library of dynamics here, I could, for example, take this piano marking and edit it and uncheck this Use Dynamic Categories font, and again change the font size here from 24 to 12. And that will literally edit the piano marking to be half as big, and you'll see that all of the piano markings that exist in your score literally get resized to half. Now that's that's sort of global, because anywhere there's a piano marking, that's going to get resized like that. There is sort of a way to do this. If you wanted a smaller piano marking for some reason elsewhere in your score, the way to do that is really to just duplicate that and then edit it and change the size that way. And this way you can have a smaller piano that you can then assign wherever you want. So you actually have two different piano markings. So that's one way to do that a little bit more locally if you actually need to do something like that. And let me just get rid of that tiny little piano marking from my library there. There we go. So that's actually literally resizing the fonts themselves. So that's one way to do it. But more to the point of what I really want to be talking about today is actually rescaling. And that's where we can change the percentage of the size of things in certain ways. Now, interestingly, in Finale, you do this with the Resize tool. I think maybe technically better to call it a scaling tool, but Finale calls it a Resize tool, so there we go. And in Finale 27, the Resize tool has a new icon. It looks like a little tiny quarter note with an arrow, and there's a larger quarter note next to it. That is the Resize tool. In every other version of Finale before 27, this was actually just a percentage sign. So I have no idea why they changed this. It's a mystery to me. That was the one icon that they changed that I was kind of like, huh? Why did they do that? But anyways, here we are. This is the Resize tool, and I'm going to show you how it works. Essentially, the Resize tool, or the scaling tool as I probably would prefer to call it, will do just that. It will scale things proportionally. And the scaling in Finale there's basically 5 levels of scaling. And with this Resize tool, I'm just going to right-click here. You can right-click anywhere, and you'll pull up this contextual menu just as a visual aid to show you what can be rescaled. And from smallest to largest, you can rescale note heads, you can rescale notes or rests or entries, you can resize the staff, the system, or the page, right? These are the 5 levels of scaling. And the thing is that when you scale, say, the notes or rests, you're including the note heads. If you scale the staff, you're including the notes or rests, which includes the note heads. If you're scaling the system, it includes the staff, etc. So the larger ones obviously encompass all of the smaller items. Now, there's also things that get attached to each of these in special ways, and I'm dedicating the second video here to really talk about that, because that is actually really important, understanding which elements get attached to notes versus note heads and stuff like that, because those elements themselves will scale with the things that they're attached to. So it is important to understand how that works, in my opinion. So you can see you can get this menu if you right click, but this is not my preferred way of using this tool, just because you can get a little bit mixed up in terms of where you're actually clicking and understanding what it is you're resizing. So I prefer to just simply click. And this is where you kind of have to be careful because you have to be a little bit precise. If you want to resize a note head, you have to click precisely in the middle of the note head, and you'll get this resize note head window. And from here we can do just that. We can resize the note head, and you'll see that it only resizes the note head. The stem and the flag remain the same size. Now, if I undo that, if I click anywhere outside the note head, but still pretty kind of in the area of the beat here, vertically speaking, what you can do is resize the note. And so now you can resize the whole note to 75%, and you'll see that not only did the note head scale, but the stem and the flag scaled as well. So it's imperative to be careful about where you're clicking. If you're a little bit ambiguous about it, you might resize the note when you meant to resize the note head. My best advice here is once you click this tool, just make sure you read the top of this little window. You can see that it says resize note versus resize note head, and there's a slight difference between the two, as you just have seen. Now, as you were able to see, you can resize notes individually like this, and that's all well and good, but if you have to resize a large portion of them, that can kind of be a pain in the neck to go through one at a time. Finale does have a tool specifically for resizing notes. In the Utilities menu, there's this option here for Change Note Size. And from here, you can change the note size for this entire selection, and you'll see that happen just like that. However, Finale does not have a utility here for changing the note head size, unfortunately. In order to do that, we actually need a third-party plugin called JW Plugins JW Change. The JW Change plugin has this note head section here, and the first option here is the resize. And this will do just that. It will resize the note heads. Now, there's a bunch of different filters here, which is great because you can do things like, resizing the top note of a chord or something. It's really, really handy. I did a whole video on the JW Change plugin, which I'll try and post right here in the video. Definitely worth checking out. But this is the tool that we'd actually have to use to resize the note heads. And you can see once I apply that, you see that I'm resizing note heads without changing the note size. And you can tell that because the flag and the beams are all still the same size, right? So again, difference between note head and note size. Incidentally, I should have mentioned this. Whenever you're resizing things with this window, whether it's note heads, notes, staffs, system, or page, this percentage does have to be a whole number. Finale does not recognize decimal points in this window. It's just what it is. It just has to be a whole number. And the other thing I want to talk about in terms of resizing notes is that there's a special thing that happens with beamed notes. So if you click on the first note to resize that note, you're actually going to end up resizing the entire set of notes that are beamed together, right? And this is just how it works. However, if you try and resize the second note, nothing's going to happen. You'll see that just nothing happened. Now, something did happen, and I'm going to do this actually on the third note, resize this to 75%. Again, still nothing happened, but Finale recognizes this D here as being resized. However, it won't really express that until you break the beam and make this its own sort of independent group. And now you can see that the second two eighth notes here are indeed resized to 75%, whereas the other ones are still at 100%. And if you reconnect them, those notes actually go back to 100%. So there's some interesting things going on here in terms of just which notes are being resized. And Finale will remember that you've resized this one to 75%, even though it's not actually showing that. So just be careful when you're beaming or when you're resizing beamed notes like that. Now, the next level up after resizing notes is staffs, right? From this little list, note heads, notes, arrest, staff, right? And to resize the staff, what you have to do is be careful not to click on the position where a note is, because then you'll get the resize note window, which is not what you want. But if you click sort of within the staff but not on a beat, you'll get the resize staff window, which is going to do just that. It's going to resize the staff relative to the other staffs around it. Now, with this window, you do have a range option, so you can choose to resize systems 1 through the end, which is sort of the default setting, or you can go up here and decide I'm only going to resize this staff for systems 1 through 1 or 1 through 2, whatever you want to put here. So if I do 1 through 1, it's only going to resize this particular staff, although I have to resize it to something. There we go, to 75%. system 1 through 1 on this particular staff. And you'll see just that staff got resized to violin 1. It did not get resized on the next system because I didn't choose the scope. Now, if I had chosen the way it is here, system 1 through the end, then you can resize that staff all the way through to the end of the piece. And if we go all the way to the end, it will be resized to 75%. Now again, you'll notice when you do that, you're obviously resizing the notes within the staff, the dynamics, anything that's attached to anything, also the time signature, the key, the clef, etc. The one thing that you're not resizing in this instance is the staff name label. This is because technically the label here is attached to the system, not the staff. Again, in the second video, I'm really going to dive into what's attached to what in terms of how things get resized. So definitely stick around for that because that's important. Interestingly, the Resize tool here, this is the only way to resize staffs. As I'm going to show you in the next section here, it is possible to resize systems and pages with the page layout tool. And you would think that there would be a way with the staff tool to select a set of staffs here and resize them, but there is no option in this menu for resizing these staffs. So as odd as it is, the Resize tool is the only way to actually resize staffs relative to the staffs around it. And then the next option is Resize Systems. And in order to get a click to resize the system here, what you want to do is you have to be within the confines of the system. So if I were to draw an imaginary box from this bottom right corner to here and all the way up to the top left corner, that's the whole imaginary box around the system. You have to click within that box, but outside of a staff. So basically any of this white space will do the trick. So if I click in here, you'll see that now I get the Resize Staff System. If I click outside of that box, even just a little bit to the left of the bar line there, you'll see it says now Resize Page, and that's different. So again, just be careful about where you're clicking. We want to resize the staff system. Now, interestingly, this is the exact same window that you would get if you use the page layout tool, select the system, and go to the page layout menu and choose Resize Staff System. You get the exact same window and it behaves the exact same way. And this is where I'm going to pause for a second, and I'm not going to show you everything to do with this window because I cover this in depth in video 21-3, which I'll put a link to in the video right here. And I encourage you to check that out because it really is an important video for understanding system and page scaling is covered in that video as well. But if you want to do this from the Resize tool, you certainly can just by clicking in this way. And again, we can choose 75%. We can choose the scope here. Let's just say system 1 through 1. And there's other options here. Again, I cover it in 21-3 and click OK. And you'll see that only the system 1 got resized versus system 2 stayed where it is. And then the final option with the Resize tool is the Resize Page. And again, click anywhere outside of a system and you'll get the Resize Page. And again, this entire window I cover in depth in video 21-3, so I'm only going to very quickly just show you what it does here. You click that to 75%, page 1 through 1, and again, you're resizing just page 1. Page 2 is remaining the same. Now, you may have noticed something important here, the difference between resizing the page and resizing the system. When I just resized the page, I hope that you noticed that the text blocks, the titles got resized as well. This is the important distinction between resizing the page, and if I undo this, you'll see those sizes go back, they'll go larger back to 100%, versus resizing the staff system, system 1 through 1, which will resize, again, everything within the staff system, but it will leave the text blocks alone because the text blocks are attached to the page, not to the system, if that makes sense. Again, the next video is going to get much more in depth, but I just wanted to quickly illustrate the difference. I mention it because I see a lot of people when they want to resize their music, it's very quick to just click over here and resize the page and do it that way. But it gets tricky with text blocks because if the text blocks are not positioned correctly, they can get moved around. If they're not set up to be at the 0 point for center or the 0 point on right, they can get moved around too far and everything, and it kind of gets a mess. So most of the time we want to resize the staff system, not resize the page itself. Again, I talk about that a lot in video 21-3, so check that out. All right, so that's basically the 5 levels of rescaling in Finale, and The last thing I want to point out is that all of this compounds. So, if I were to go in here and resize the note head here to 75%, and then I were to resize the whole note to 75%, you'll see that the note head also gets, again, 75% smaller than the 75%. And then, of course, I can resize the staff to 75, and that note head gets even smaller. If I were to resize the system and the page and everything, then obviously it's 75% of 75% of 75%, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it does compound. And just as a point of reference, most of the time your page percentage, if I go in here and just click outside here to the page, most of the time your page percentage is going to be set to 100%. And I usually recommend that you keep it this way. Again, if you want to make the music smaller, I recommend rescaling the system, not the page. And when things are at 100%, the font sizes are true font sizes. So if this font here is, I don't even remember what I put this at. Let's see. This font size is, it's at other. It's at 20. So this 20-point font that I have here for the text, this is going to be exactly the same if you were to put this in a word processor document at 20-point font. It would be the exact same size. As soon as you start scaling things, then those sizes don't start to not match. So if this page was set to 80%, it would be 80% of 20, right? The systems usually are scaled at something. Now this system is, and there's two ways to do this. There's staff height and resizing. Again, I talk about this in the page layout tool a lot more, but the resulting system scaling is 70%. So any 20-point font that exists within the system is actually 70% of 20. Anyway, just getting slightly technical here, but understand that at 100%, if everything's at 100%, then the font sizes are actually true font sizes. But once you get past the page, that's rarely the case, which is why a lot of times you'll see a 12-point font in a score, and you're like, wow, that's not really 12-point. It's really a lot smaller than that. But anyway, I digress. Much more on that in the next few videos, especially the next one I think is important, which will talk about the things that get attached to these 5 levels of scaling. So I think that's important to learn as well. All right, so thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. My name is Jason. As always, please, please, please subscribe if you haven't done so. And I will see you on the next video.